Beginning our Daf Mesech Yevamos Daf Samach, we begin several lines down at the top of the Yomim. We continue explaining the brayso that we're discussing from the previous Daf regarding Anusa and Mefuta, regarding those that are prohibited to that of the Kahuna. Asher's corresponds to Gazich and Cheskel to the Bacham Shem during today's Daf. Some of the things discussing today's Daf are, which we started the discussion already in the previous Daf, regarding someone who's Ma'ana Seinara. He's chayav to pay her a knas and marry her. In contrast, we said when he's mafate nara, so he's chayav to marry her, but again, if he marries her, then he does not have to pay the knas. A kohen gadol is forbidden to marry anusis and mafutas atzmai, although generally one has to marry the one who's mafate ma'anis, but a kohen gadol, by default, he has to marry a basula, and if he's ma'anis and mafate, obviously not a basula. And we discussed with some mafutas and chavera regarding the prohibition of a kohen gadol to marry if she was seduced or violated by his friend. Then we continue with the later sugi, when is a kohen permitted to be mitamet to his sister, when is he not allowed to be mitamet to his sister, whether a kohen is permitted to marry a giyaris, she's under 3 years old, even though generally by a giyaris we have concerns regarding her status for a kohen, but regarding if she was under 3, that's going to be permitted. So the brayso we discussed, when we started the conversation with the previous stop, was regarding women that are kohen gadol forbidden from marrying. It says in the pasuk, "Ki basula yikach," a kohen gadol only allowed to marry basula. So we're doing the brayso, Nusas Asman Mafutas Asman. We said he's not allowed to marry. So even the general person is obligated to marry Nara that he was Ma'anas Mafata. But here it's going to be different because by default she's not a basula. But the brayso said Nasa said that if he's going to marry, it's going to be considered married. Now, however, he had said he has to divorce her. It says Nasa. So he said the marriage is valid only regarding Shem Mishal Kanas Kimafuta. It just doesn't have to pay the penalty. Because when you mafata, if you marry, you don't have to pay the kanas. So we're saying for that, it's considered married, but of course he has to divorce her. Now, the problem is on this part of the halacha, the Gemara says, we say, Begeres Mukas Eitz L'Yisrael Nasa Nasa, which we said over there, that means because ultimately she can become Mukas Eitz Tachta, she can become Begeres Tachta, Zeiros, she can become a Bu'ula Tachta. But it remained with a kasha. Now we continue with the next part of the brayso, 7 lines down at the top of the Yomim of Samach. Anusas Chaver, Mafutas Chaver. The brayso continues with a related halacha. If this woman was seduced or raped by his friend, so then the kohen gadol is lo yisa. He's not allowed to marry this woman because she's a bula. The nasa, and now regarding this halacha, we quoted this brayso and now we're explaining it. If he married her, so we have machlekes. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says avlat chol. The child is a cholol, but chachamim have avlat kasha. Chachamim say that the child is going to be kasha. First, the Gemara points out, he says that the child, if this kohen gadol marries this rape victim, so then the child is going to be a cholol. The child is going to be a cholol. Now, those that say, might tell Rabbi Shloimy, he was saying, what's the reason Rabbi Shloimy that the child is going to be a cholol? Because Sabalah could have a loser. What's this Rabbi Shloimy? So later on, the Samach Al from the Beis, in the next daf, the Gemara tells us, if a single boy with a single girl, not for the purposes of marriage, have intimacy, so that is making her into a zayna, and there's a negative prohibition for kahuna to marry a zayna. So by default, this woman who already had intimacy with another man became a zayna. So anusas chaver mafutas chaver is going like Rabbi Lazar, who holds even if a single boy with a single girl have intimacy, that makes her into a zayna. So that's why the child is going to be chol.
What about psula? Is she a psula?
What?
She's not a psula anymore.
Right, this is even with a kohen even. It makes the child into a cholol. Right, but a kohen gadol, but I mean, that's, well, the question is, what would make it into a cholol? So that's, so the Gemara is actually going to discuss that. Meaning, even if she's a ba'ula, but there's no negative prohibition, that's going to be the discussion. It says, Kim b'sula me'amav yikach. What makes the child into a cholol? A cholol is not necessarily from, he has a passive commandment, but who said that there's no negative? That's actually going to be the next shot in the Gemara. But first, obviously, the Chacham hold the woman's not a zayna because they don't hold like Rabbi Lazar that makes her into a zayna because she had one act of intimacy with another boy, another man, and therefore the child would not be a cholol. Problem is, the Gemara says, Misabel Kabasei, really? Does Rav really rule like Rabbi Lazar? But we know Mishnah's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Kabanaki, meaning you're telling me Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who holds the child's a chol, is going like Rabbi Lazar. Is that really so? But we know his teachings are kav, very small, but they're very clean, and halacha is always like it. So, but the problem is, but regarding this halacha, pani and pani with a single boy and a single girl, which is brought later on the parak, ain't no Rabbi. How can you tell me Rabbi ben Yaakov, who we generally rule like him, is going like Rabbi who we don't rule like? Says Gemara Kash, that's definitely a difficulty for that interpretation to say that's the reason why Charles Chal, because that means this girl was a zayna because of the one act that she was seduced by this boy. But the Gemara gives another pshat. Rav Ashi, he says Rabbi ben Yaakov is not going like Rabbi, and she's not a zayna, this girl, because one time she had something with a boy, and there's no negative prohibition. But b'yesh chal mechiv asay kamefliki. That is the dispute. What we were just talking about a moment ago. There's a positive commandment, Bisula Yikach. Now, it doesn't say in the Torah the Kohen Gadol cannot marry Bula. The inference is, obviously, if you have to marry Bisula, not a Bula. Now, that's called a Lava Ba Machal Aseh. A negative prohibition that's derived from a positive commandment is qualified, although it's telling you what you cannot do, halachically, it's categorized as a positive commandment. It's just what you, because it's saying what you should do, and obviously you know now what you cannot do. The question is, does such a child from such a union, create a chal? Yes, that's still prohibited, whether by the virtue, by the force of a positive commandment. Child can make chal. But there's no chal from mechiv asay. I think the child's going to be kosher. Now, it says my time what's the reason of Yaakov that there is a chal from mitzvah? Say what's his source? Because the pasuk says in Yikra, it says almana ugurusha. It's talking about all the women that a Kohen Gadol cannot marry. A widow, a divorcee, a chalala, a zayna, as elo, you can all these you cannot take. Ki im besula b'gayma, only if she's a virgin, etc. Yikach miyam. Now, it says after that, v'lo yichal zara b'hamov, that he should not desecrate, make a chilul, a chalala of his children and his people. Oh, that's going on kulu. That's going on all the previous pasuk, even when it says abesula yikach, which is the inference, and not a bula, which is a positive commandment. So you see, a chalala is even on ki besula. But for Rabbanan, they would tell you that no, Eila hifsika inyan. Because after it talks about the negative prohibitions of Amona, Grusha Chalola, like we have in the Pasuk, it says, Es Eila la yikach. Eila is like mafsik. It says, oh, only these are Chiva Lavin. They're different than the Chiva Aseh. Which Taisa says very interesting. He says, what do you mean? The next Pasuk is the one that says, that's going what I just said previously, which was the last thing said over there was Kim Vesula. This says, yeah, but it's more logical to say we're creating chachol and Eila is separating between them. That would say it's going on the negative prohibition, not that of a positive commandment. So the Chacham hold that no, it's only going to be a chiv alav. But Rabbi Yaakov, he says no. Eila, you're right. Eila is like stopping. What's the point? Not to say it's not going on besula me'amav on the chiv aseh of bula. It's the mu'utei nida. It's coming to exclude that if let's say a kohen has relations with his wife that's a nida, that Eila saying these and not something else is excluding a nida. Nida, chip, creases, whatever. Still, it's not going to make the child into a chalal. Says Gemara, following on that exact point, Kaman Azal Hadatanya, according to whom is the following brisa going like? That it says, Me Eila, when it says there in the pasuk by the Kohen Gadol, Es Eila la'yikach, from Eila, Ata Isachal, you're going to make a child a chal. Ve'ata Isachal, Minida, but you don't make a child a chal, from Nida, Kaman Azal like. So that's Kaman Azal Yaakov. Like we just explained, that's the machlekes. What do you do with Eila? That's like Kaman Azal Yaakov. That says Gemara from Kaman Azal Yaakov, but if that's the case, Nichtevei le'Eila le'Basayich. If you're telling me that Eila is only coming to be Mamayit Nida, but it's not going to separate to say, oh, as Eila, lo yikach, that's where lo yichal is going on. Because Eila is saying these, and not the next thing we're about to say. If it's not doing that, because lo yichal is going on all of them, so why did you say it at the end when you finish the whole pasuk? Because not coming to divide. So I think Makasha definitely is a difficulty to who? It says Rashi to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi will explain the machlek of Lezmi Yaakov Nacham in the explanation of these psukim. According to him, it's difficult. Why then would Eila be in the middle of the pasuk and not be at the end? Now, related discussion, says the Gemara, regarding this that comes into the discussion of Baigeres and Mukaseitz, a lot of different things that we discussed. So regarding Tarnaban, there's a related discussion regarding, like we're talking about Basula, who is a Basula. That comes to discussion not just for the Kohen Gadol. There's two elements we're discussing. A Kohen Gadol is married Basula. Now there's someone else also that for when the Basula is relative. That's for the Kayin, who could he be B'tamet himself to? Kayin has a prohibition in the Torah. We know Kayin always busy with branches and cemeteries and whatever. Kayin are always busy. They can't be B'tamet unless to their 7 relatives. One of them is a sister. We'll see exactly which sister could he be B'tamet to. So we're talking about Linda Brisa. Achoise arusa, his sister that's engaged. This is of a kain hedge, because as Rashi points out, if his sister would be married, obviously it cannot be betama, because it says in the Torah, "Achoise habesula." So it's very important that we spoke about besula regarding kain gadol who can marry. It's also relevant for tumas kayanim that he can only be betama up to his sister that's a besula. So if she's married, which she's not a besula anymore, obviously cannot be betama. But if let's say his sister is engaged, what's the halacha? It's actually a machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda, they say metamala, he can make himself tamitar. Rabbi Shimon, they say no, metamala cannot be metam himself to her. Now, what's with a nusa umafuta? What's with if she was raped or seduced? That of the kayin, his sister. So different kol metamala. Everyone agrees he cannot be metam himself to her. And the Gemara is going to explain all the explanation of each one of these opinions as we go. And umukas eitz, what's with if a woman lost her besulam, but through some artificial means, like through a piece of wood? So imatamala, the Rabbi Shimon. Shimon says no, you cannot be metam to her, because he says the following dictum: if this woman is fit to marry Kohen Gadol, so that means she's a besula, then metamala, then you can metam yourself to her. If such a woman would not be fit for the Kohen Gadol to marry, then they metamala. Cannot metam herself, because as Rashi points out, both of them say besula. Now, moreover, Shimon is going l'shitase according to his reasoning that he said in our Mishnah that a mukas eitz is asur to a Kohen Gadol. Obviously, mukas eitz is not a besula. She's not a virgin anymore. She lost her virginity. So then the brother cannot be metam a Kohen hedge, cannot be metam her either because she's not a chaysa besula. That's Rabbi Shimon. Now, ubegeres, regarding ubegeres, that metamala, if his sister is 14 and she's a single girl, the Kohen hedge could be metamatar. That's difficult. Odom, that everyone agrees to. Meaning even Reb Meir, who he says in our Mishnah that actually a begeres is possible to the Kohen Gadol. Here, so wait, I thought it's the same. Isn't it the same? No. Here regarding a Kohen being metamatar, we have a ribui, as we learn later on. We have a special inclusion, and therefore he is going to be able to metamatar to his sister. That's a 15-year-old girl. Now, says the Gemara goes to explain now their opinion. My time Rabbi Yehuda, what's the reason of Meir and Yehuda that they hold that the Kohen could be metam himself to his sister that's engaged? So this is a little bit technical. This is how you darshan this pasuk that it talks about by the Kahana. The darshan hachi, because they expound the pasuk like this. It says, actually in these parashas in the Yukar Chav Aleph, it says that v'la'chayse habesula, and to his sister that's a virgin. What's that coming to say? Meaning it says, the full pasuk says, to his sister that's a virgin, hakribla, that's close to Mashallah, that was not married to a man, lo yitam tahar, he can be metam. So the Gemara is going to break apart these words in according to each opinion how to darshan them. So when it says v'lachayis habesula according to Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, so that's pratlan nus mafuta. Obviously that's excluding if his sister was seduced or was raped, that she's not a besula anymore. So obviously he cannot be metam himself to her. Now, you would think it would exclude also a woman that through artificial means also lost her besula because she's not a besula anymore. So she's not achayis besula. Talmud Lyman know that the pasuk qualifies which type of besula are we looking for. Ish, that because she wasn't intimate with a man. We're talking about that what happened to her was through a man. You have to do ish. That excludes mukas eitz, even though she's not a besula anymore, but she did not become a non-besula through relations with a man. It was through some artificial means. Therefore, that would still qualify for the kohen to be metamata. Now, when it says the word hakarayva, the one that's close, that according to Yehuda and Reb Meir is l'rabbeis harusa. It's coming to include if she's engaged. Now, Rashi's bothered. Why do you need a ribui? What's the problem? She was never married. She's only engaged, and she's still a besula. Says Rashi, you need a ribui because you don't want to say when it says hashaloi haisa, you would think maybe excludes an engaged woman because she was haisa, because haisa generally means havai, which is kedushin. So she already had kedushin. You would think it was haisa leish. Saying no, because it says hakareba that's close to him, that's a ribui. What it was that word hakareba coming to tell you to include it in his sister that's engaged. And when it says the word elav, hakareba elav, to him that's also an extra word. Let's rabbis habegeres that's going to include even if she's a begeres, where even though she does not have a besulam intact, because she's already maturing and she's starting to lose some of that besulam, still, that's a lot. But the Gemara says, what do you mean? Alam likra. You tell me, remain who need a pasek to include a begeres? But Meir was quoted already. We said this already on Daf Nun Tes in the previous Daf. He says when it says in the Torah Besula, so we had a machlokes is exactly what does that mean? Meir was quoted saying Afil Mitzvahs Besula Mashma. Meir had said, if you recall from the previous Daf, he said that why by the Kohen Gadol did it say that Isha Bivsuleha Yikach? We said that the extra Yud Hey Bivsuleha is coming to exclude the Begeres, which we said the inference is, had it not said Bisuleha, had it just said Basula, it would have included Begeres. Because Basula doesn't have to be all the Basula, as long as there's some Basula that's still considered Basula. So wait a second, so of course the Basula is including even a Begeres, so why do you need a special riboy of a love to include a Begeres? Says, but Itzrach no is necessary. You know why? So you would have thought to say Nelit Basula Mei Hasam. Now it's actually Machlokes Rashi tells what Hasam is over there. Rashi says Mei Hasam is from the parsha of Ma'anas. By the parsha of rape, it says Ki Yimatze Ish Nara Basula. If a man finds a Nara, a girl that's a Basula, in Dvarim Chabez. Now Malal Nara, just like when it says Basula, it also says that she's a Nara. Av Kanami Nara, also over here would be a Nara, which is a girl not over 12 and a half, which would exclude a Begeres. Mashmalan, that's what you need to have a special read, but I love to tell you to know that the halacha of Yev Besula would even be if she's Begeres, does not have to be a Nara like it says over there by Ma'anas. Okay, that explains the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Yissi, Rabbi Shimon, my Tamayu, what's the reason of their opinion that they hold by an engaged woman, you could not be metamed to her even though she's just engaged? They expand the Pesukim differently, as the Gemara explains. When it says to his sister that's a Besula, that's excluding La Anusa, Umafuta, and he adds on, which the other opinions did not add on, from this is a Mukaseitz, because the Mukaseitz is not a Besula. Now when it says Ashala Hoisa, that was not Hoisa Ish, Prat La Arusa, they're excluding Arusa, because that is Hoisa. That was Hoisa Ish, that was Habaya, she's engaged. When it says HaKadoim, the one that's close, is L'Rabis Arusa Shenisgarsha. They hold, yes, it's including if she was only engaged, but then got divorced. So, although when she's engaged, it's Hoisa, but she was never intimate with another man, she's still a Basula. So if she got divorced, the word Hakrem is actually coming to include that actually the brother would be able to metamatar. And when it says Elah to him, that's L'Rabis as a Begeres, that's coming to include the Begeres that he can be metamatar too. So the Gemara explains. You're telling me the word Akreva, the close one, is L'Rabis Arusa Shenisgarsha. It's coming to include if she was engaged, but then subsequently got divorced. So the Gemara continues on base and says, how can you say that? Whose opinion are we explaining right now? We're explaining Rabbi Shimon. But V'amr Rabbi Shimon, as the Gemara says, he said, we quoted this just before. He said, any woman that's fit for a Kohen Gadol, metamala. So the brother that's the Kohanim family can be metamatar. She'en yuru l'Kohen Gadol. Whoever's not fit for Kohen Gadol, who's not fit for Kohen Gadol? A Gerusha, a metamala. So how could you tell me that Gerusha Shenis Garsha, which even a Kohen head you cannot marry, that such a woman you can be metamed to? Says the Gemara, you're right, good question. But Shani Hassam, which really means over here it's different, because the Rabbi Rachman Kureva. The Pasuk has a riboy of Kureva, which Kureva is saying someone that's close, which his single sister that got engaged and broke off the engagement, and now she's considered close to him. So we have a special riboy saying that such a woman can be metamed to. So the Gemara says, yeah, if that's the case, Mukaseitz not metamed. So why didn't you include also Mukaseitz, where she's also close to him? She never had B with anyone either. So why don't you say that also would be included from the word of Akureva? Says, no, Kureva is singular. The close one, which is Achet V'Shtayim, we're only telling you one and not two. So says, Marisa, what do you see fit? Why are you picking and choosing? Why are you saying that you're including his sister that was engaged and now it broke off and you're excluding the one of Mukaseitz? Says, I'll tell you the difference. By Mukaseitz, it's Abed B'Maisa. It was an action that was done to her, which is that now she lost her Basulam actively through a piece of wood. But the woman that was engaged, nothing was done to her body. She's the same girl as she always was. So therefore, that's what we're going to be including that he can be done and excluding that of Mukaseitz. Now the Gemara comments that Rabbi Yossi, Medeshavki lebarzuge, meaning by the case of Arusa, we had a machlekes between Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda on the one hand, and Rabbi Yossi B'Shimon on the other hand. Rabbi Yossi B'Shimon disagreed in the case of Arusa. They held that you cannot be metamata. Now, when they came to the next case of Mukas Eitz, what is the halachic status of a Kohen Hedger being Matama to his sister that's Mukas Eitz? The only one that disagreed was Reb Shimon. Reb Yesi somehow left the pier. He was the pier by Arus to say it's Aser. He didn't say anything. He didn't say, oh, but Mukas Eitz, you cannot be Matama. Mechlal, Mukas Eitz, obviously by a Mukas Eitz, Kremes really, obviously there Reb Yesi holds like Reb Meir, that you could be Matama. Says the Imam Manole. Where does he know this from? Says the Imam Milohois Leish. Reb Meir had darshan. What's Lohois Leish? If anyone had Havaya through a man, that would disqualify her from the brother being Matama. But Mukas Eitz, which is not through a Havaya Leish, so then even though she doesn't have somebody, give him Matama. Says the Imam, but Hafikse. Reb Yisi already used Lohois Leish to exclude an Arusa. To say that he cannot be Matama to the Arusa, which that's where he disagreed with Reb Meir. Because there the Havaya was to a man by engagement. So how could you learn out the halacha of agreement of Mukas Eitz from Lohois Leish? Says the Gemara, there's two sources. Meaning the word Lohois Leish, you could break into two different limudim. Chad bi Lohoisa. One of the teachings was from Lohoisa, which that excludes Narusa, which had Hoisa, which was engaged. And B'chad is from the next one, Mileish, which that permits a Mukas Eitz, because her ruination is not through an ish. It was through a piece of wood. So you can learn out both from the same words, Lohois Leish. Lohoisa is one limit, and Leish is another limit. Now the Brisa said that a love, what do we learn from a love? L'rabbis ha-begeres. He said according to everyone, a begeres, even though she's a 20-year-old girl, and she's a begeres, he can be metame himself to his sister. Says the Gemara, we'd explained for Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. The problem is, Ba'amar Reb Shimon, we never discussed that. Reb Shimon was quoted also in the previous daf, and he says when it says in the Torah, Besula Shlema Mashma, he actually, if the word itself Besula means the Besula intact. And actually that's why, from the fact that they're trying to tell you Besulaha by the Kohen Gadol, that obviously the Reb Shimon says coming to permit a begeres for Kohen Gadol. Because the word Besula without any deviation means intact. When you're adding Besulaha, it means it does not have to be intact, which includes begeres for Kohen Gadol. But ultimately over here where it says just the word Besula, would actually mean to say it has to be full Besulim. So how could you include a begeres, which does not have a Besulim intact? So it's like, oh yeah, time of the day, Nami Hasam. Yes, but we said on the previous daf of the Kohen Gadol, where he said Besulim means intact, is actually Mehacha, it's from here. The Darash Hachi, because he expounded in our Gemara, we quoted that he says from the word Midde Elah, is what is L'Rabbis HaBegeres, that includes Begeres, that will be included as a Besula for the laws of a brother being Matam himself to his sister. Mechal, the inference is, the Besula is Besula Shlemashma. Obviously the word Besula without a Ribui means intact, from the fact that you need a special Ribui over here. You're asking, Besula means intact, how can you, Hagufa? That's where he knows it from. He knows Besula is intact. His source, we had a random machlekes. We said, he says Bezul means intact, Bezul not intact. Where'd you get this from? He gets it from over here. The fact that I needed a ribui to tell you, to include a begeres, obviously if I didn't, Bezul would disqualify him. So that's actually where he knows that concept is from over here. So nothing more continues with this conversation that we're talking about regarding Besulim as it applies to a Kohen. Tanya Litna Brisa. Shimon ben Yefi says, Gyeres Pchuzim Ashol Shememecha. A girl who was 2 years old, converted to Judaism with her parents, whatever, she became a convert. So Ksher L'Kuhuna. So since she was under 3 years old, she's kosher to marry a Kohen. In other words, we don't presume her to be like a Zayna, where although by non-Jews that they're not so they don't have so much discretion, and we suspect that they had znus. But if she's under 3 years old, it's okay, we don't treat her as a Zayna. Why? Remember the pasuk says in Bamidbar by the captives of the Midianite women. It says, V'cholataf banashim, and all the young girls of the women, that don't know about having lain with a man, that you could keep alive for yourself, you could keep, and all you men can take those girls. Now, it says Pinchas was a Kohen, and Pinchas was with those soldiers. That means Pinchas could also take the girls. But Pinchas a Kohen, how could he take the non-Jewish girls? Because we're talking about that they didn't know Mishkav Zachar, meaning that they were not yet old enough to have an active bia, which is under the age of 3. And therefore, that's how you see that they're kosher bakuna. What do they do? The Rabban who disagree, and they say that no, that even if a girl's under 3 and she became a gerus, you cannot marry her to kuna. It says over there that Pinchas was able to take the girl. That's Lavan Mashvachis. They say that's only for slaves and maidservants, not for marriage. For marriage, even under 3 would be problematic. But then the Gemara asks, okay, on this halacha of Shimon ben Yochi, if that's the case, if your source is from this pasuk by the Midianite women, then even if even if she's over 3 years old, according to Rabbi Shimon, it should be kosher for kahuna, as long as she didn't have beer. Because this pasuk is particular about having beer. And it says, whoever did not have beer, you could keep alive. So why are you saying that the criterion is the age of 3? Says the Gemara, no, you cannot say that if a girl is over 3 years old, that the pasuk is telling you that you can keep them alive. Although the simple translation of the pasuk seems to be, but as we're going to explain, it can't be. Because Rav Huna posed a contradiction. And as Taisa explains, the Torah wants you to see the contradiction and spar and figure out what it is that we want you to say. On the one hand, it says in the pasuk, call Isha, any woman. Now, word Isha sounds like an adult. That it says, if she's Yudas Ish L'mishkav Zachar, if she knows a man for having lain carnally, so how do you go? So, in other words, if she was intimate with a man, those women are the Midianite women you had to kill. Now, any Yudas, which sounds like, but if let's say the woman had never been intimate with a man, Kaimu, you could keep such a woman alive. Okay, that's regarding an adult woman. The inference is that the young girls, whether they were intimate with a man or wasn't, Kaimu, you could keep them alive. It's only a woman that's an adult. It's dependent on if she ever had B or not. But a girl, you can keep alive. Okay, so the problem is another pasuk. It says that any of the young girls or the women, which we quoted this pasuk before, that didn't know any laying with a man, you can keep alive. Now it sounds like a yadi haroiku. Sounds like, but if the girl didn't have intimacy with a man, you have to kill it. So that's contradicting the previous pasuk. So, like they say, as doch gespart. In other words, what it's coming to tell you is, and the fact that the pasukim might never go one or the other, obviously, when the pasuk tells you regarding intimacy or non-intimacy, it doesn't mean literally having had intimacy. Because if that would be the case, then you wouldn't be able to resolve the contradictory inferences of the pasukim. Rather, it means the pasuk is telling you if she's fit to have bia, which means that any woman that was fit to have yediyah, that you have to kill. Oh, so now, says Rashi, what it sounds like the pasuk is telling you, that a woman, even if she's a girl that's 3 years old, but she's fit to have intimacy because a girl over 3 is fit to have bia, that you have to execute, meaning, and don't be medayik. Oh, but a young girl, whether she had intimacy or not, you should keep alive. No, because we're not talking about actual intimacy. We're talking about whoever's fit to have intimacy. Rather, that the Torah is telling you is under 3 years old, but over 3 years old, then you have to kill. Which text really says you can know from one of the psukim, you don't really have to have a contradiction. And actually, that's time the halach. Actually, the following brisa seems to be like that. The brisa says, "All Ishi does is, and any woman that knows a man, so that's the one that you had to execute." Now, says the brisa, what the pasuk is talking about is not that she had intimacy. It's talking about even if she didn't have intimacy, if she was able to have bia. Says the brisa, do you really say it's about the fit to have bia? Maybe it means to say literally that she had bia. Says the brisa, because remember when the pasuk says and any young girl of the women that didn't know intimacy with a man. Now, this Isha that we're talking about, it's saying that even if she did not have intimacy, you should kill. Because it's saying taf banoshim, but that's the taf. But an Isha, an adult, would sound like even if she did not have yediyah. Obviously what that's telling you is obviously the pasuk is telling you if you're fit to having bia, if you're an Isha, automatically you're going to be killed. If you're not, if you're younger, if you're under 3, that's what we mean by taf, that you're not roy for yediyah, then they're not going to be killed. Now the Gemara says, now how did they know which girls were under 3 to know if they were fit for bia or not? Because that was they had to kill. That they didn't have a registry over there. Under 3 they kept alive. Over 3 they had to kill. So this says what they did was like as follows: Havidim of tzitz. The Kohen Gadol was there. They passed him by in front of the tzitz, which was the plate that he wore on his forehead. Kol shepenei marikis, which Rashi says this is a miracle. Any girl that her face turned colors, you do shiur of the bow. You know that she was fit to have bia, and then you executed her. Kasha in penei marikis, and when her face did not change colors, you do shiur of the bow. You knew that she's not fit for bia, and then you kept her alive. Now, similarly, which actually related inversely, Omer of Nachman says similar Avera, a sign for sinful conduct, which generally means to say when you say the generic word Avera in the Gemara, generally means to say illicit relations. So a sign for this is Hadreikin. Hadreikin is that there's an intestinal illness, that the stomach flesh gets hard and thick and it blows up, it gets bloated. So that is Hadreikin, which is the face of the sinners change color, become yellowish. Which Tais says Hadreikin is not the same thing as Yarkin, but definitely it does also have that element of that sickness. Similarly, it says the pasuk in Shoftim, the Imtzu Meyishvi Yavish Gilad, they found from the settlers of Yavish Gilad, Arba Meis and Arba Sula, they found 400 maiden virgins, that they were never intimate with a man. What's this referring to? Rashi gives us the historical background that in the days of the Pelegish Begiva, which was the infamous story that there was a Pelegish, a concubine, a woman that was killed, and all the Jewish people came to fight Shevet Binyamin. Now, the people of Yavish Gilad were killed because they didn't come to fight with the rest of the brothers against Shevet Binyamin. So actually, the rest of the Shvatim actually killed them. Now, they kept alive the girls that never had Bia, and they left them over for the remnants of Shevet Binyamin so that they could have women to marry. So they took the virgins and they gave them over to the Shevet Binyamin. Says how did they know who was Lo Yadu Mishkev Zachar and who wasn't? So Rav Kahana says what they did is what they did is they had the women sit on the barrel of wine. If she was ba'ula, if she was open, so then there would actually be, like Rashi says in Daf Yomi, that from her mouth you would be able to smell the aroma of the wine, because it entered through her lower opening and it came out through the upper opening. If she's a basula, if she's a virgin, the aroma would not come through her mouth. What? I'm saying we say if they had laid with a man, meaning they weren't basula.
If it was a virgin.
Right.
She could have been a virgin and had mishkil zucha.
How could you be? Oh, yeah, you want to know, it seems like over there, exactly, that it seems like it was done in the Kedarka way, right? Says the Gemara, why they do that? Because this is why we brought in this Gemara. Why don't they do like they did by B'nai Midyan? Why did they just pass in front of the tzitz and then they would change colors? But Rav Kahana, he says, no, the pasuk says in Shemais, regarding the big day kahuna, l'rotzim laham ksef. It says that the tzitz is going to be for willingness for you. L'rotzim l'paranas. We're not using the tzitz as a punishment. It's only for willingness. Says Gemara, but just keep the midyanami. Then how do they take the Midianite girls and pass them in front of the tzitz? And Rashi says, yeah, but it says l'rotzim laham ksef. It says willingness for them, for the Jewish people. For the Jewish people, it's willingness and for punishment. For non-Jewish women, it could even be for punishment, which is as it was, but for the Jewish women, it had to be over the barrel of wine. He says, like we said, this whole sugya, that a giyaris at less than 3 years old is going to be kosher for kuhuna, which, as we said, that doesn't make her into a zayna, as we see from the Pesukim of Midyan. Now, he says, did you explicitly hear from Yeshua Levi that he ruled like Rabbi Shimon Yochai? Or did you hear it from the inference that you heard a teacher from him that you're inferring from that he obviously held like Rabbi Shimon? So he said, my klal. From which klal would you think to say that I would be inferring to say that he ruled like Rabbi Shimon Yochai? He says, I'll tell you which one. Rabbi Shimon Levi. Shimon Levi, who we're talking about, he had quoted the following teaching. He says, Ir Achas Haisam Eretz Yisrael. There was a city in Eretz Yisrael, Shekavel of Arab, that there was rumors that they wanted to invalidate a family in the city. The Shagar Rebbe es Rebbe Romanis, and Rebbe sent Rebbe Romanis, Ubadka, and he checked out what's going on. Umatza, and he found over there Bas Giyaris Pechusim Bashal Remecha. There was a girl who had converted under 3 years old, and that's what the rumors were. They wanted it possible because hey, there's a Giyaris. The Rebbe validated for Kuna, where he permitted her to remain with her husband the Kain. So that's where I would have inferred this halacha that you're telling me that you're holding B'Shim Ben Yochai, that a girl under 3 years old is okay. So Amalei says, no, I heard explicitly from B'Shim Ben that he said halacha B'Shim Ben Yochai. And says and if that was the cloud that I heard from that this teaching, that what would Reb Zer have a problem with? That he's asking, would here explicitly or from that cloud? Well, and let's say what's in that cloud. That seems to be a definitely good inference that he obviously holds, like Reb Yomi says. No, maybe there's different. Maybe because the Kohen was already married, so that's why he was able to stay married. But who said that he would have allowed it initially to be done like that? Because they both say, but get us the mukas eitz regarding a girl that's over 12 and a half, or if she's a mukas eitz, lo yisa. He says that no, the Kohen Gadol is not supposed to marry her. The nasa, if he married, he could stay married. So maybe that would be the same thing over here. Maybe he wouldn't really rule like Mishum ben Yochim. But since she was already married, this 2-year-old, so they're sure they're able to stay married. But who said he would allow her? Says the Gemara, what? That was his question? Hachi hashta, can you compare the two cases? We understand over there why by the Begeres and the Mukas Eitz where you let it be the Evid after the fact, because as we said, this small on the previous stuff on the top of the summon, Soifeli is Begeres Tachta, she'd end up being a Begeres anyways during the marriage. Soifeli is Bull Tachta, she ended up being Mu'ula Mukas Eitz anyway. So we let it after the fact. If you did marry the Begeres, if you did marry the Mukas Eitz, you can stay married because anyways she's going to come to that. But over here, Soifeli is Zaina Tachta? What, you think she ended up being a Zaina with him? If you hold that it's actually possible under 3 years old, it's because you hold that a problem about znus, as goyim have it. And if that's the case, then it wouldn't make a difference. Like it's chilul b'diavad, it would be aser. So how could you tell me that maybe you would say that maybe it doesn't really rule like Mishum ben Yochim only it's b'diavad? There would be no reason to say b'diavad. It's not comparable to that of Mukas Eitz and the way you could say it would work b'diavad. And actually, the Gemara says Rav Safra Masnal Machlala. Actually, Rav Safra actually did learn out this teaching that Yeshua Levi holding Yeshua Levi from that teaching that he said regarding that city that do ma'ar or whatever. And Bakash had the difficulty, like we asked. Well, maybe it's different because Hav answer instant. And Bashal Hachi actually answered like this: is no, because you can't compare them. You would it would be end up being Bu'ula Tafta. But over here, where you would never become a Zoyna Tafta, you must say that Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg actually held Shema Yechi, and you could know it Machlala Idma. Now, however, the Gemara does conclude and says, Hahu Kahana. There was a certain kind, the Insid Giyeres, he married a girl who converted under the age of 2, meaning even now she's, let's say, 20, but she converted to Judaism when she was 2, and a Kohen married her. What is this? Amalei says, what do you mean? Like we just quoted before. Amalei said to him, Zil up, go and remove her. If not, I'm going to take Rabbi Yaakov Idi out of your ears. In other words, I'm going to excommunicate you, and I'm going to remove her forcibly, which obviously they didn't hold like B'Shim ben Yochi, that even though she was under 3, still a problem about Zaina and the marrying this girl, and therefore he was saying that no, we don't follow that in practice, and therefore we have to divorce. Thank you for anything.